Hey everyone.
Hello, sir.
I think I overheard somebody saying, I assume that picture, and I assume that picture is, and Yulia was saying that picture was taken about 10 minutes ago. Thank you, Yulia. You could have said 10 years ago. You could have said 10 years ago.
It's quite accurate.
Actually, it was last year, I think, but it's amazing what you can do with Photoshop nowadays.
You haven't aged a day, Giles. You look the same as when I last saw you.
That sounds like Mark.
It is indeed, sir.
Can't see you, mate, but hello. How are you?
How you doing, mate?
I'm good.
I think I was probably about 15 years or so since I last actually saw you face to face.
Could be.
I think so. Yeah. I seem to remember a Hammersmith, the ship.
Was it as long as 15 years ago?
I think so.
It could have been.
The last time I went to one of those.
Yeah, well, that's the last time I'm going to one of those, I tell you.
Good to see you, mate. You're looking well.
Thank you. I was doing some work for a client on Friday who I haven't worked for 6 years, and a man who used to know me there got me on the screen and said, Giles, you haven't aged a day. And I thought, thanks, but I have reached the age where people start telling me I don't look my age. Like everything in life is double-edged. Okay, so shall we get some storytelling going on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. I reckon, Yulia, we could maybe mute everyone except me. Is that all right?
Yep.
I'm sure I heard some violin practice going on in the background.
Yeah.
So, we are here today to share the stories of the Vikings. Amazing, energetic, talented people that have a huge impact on the British Isles, on much of Europe, on Russia, America, Africa. They went everywhere. They did a lot of smash and grab raids. They also did a lot of trade, and they took their culture everywhere. And so over the next few weeks, I'm going to be telling you some of their stories about what they believed about who they were and what their world was. And James Live is going to illustrate as we go. And I'm hoping James is good and ready to go. And I will start. So a long time ago in Sweden, there was a king. This king's name was Gylfi. And you know what? Truth be told, he really liked being king of Sweden. He lived in a magnificent castle, looking over what he privately thought was the most beautiful land in all of the world. Even in the deep midwinter, when Sweden was covered in snow and didn't really get light for very long, when he was gathered with his nobles, the housecarls and the jarls, and attended by servants, by thralls. You know that English word, enthralled? It comes from Scandinavian. The fire roaring, the meat cooking, the ale flowing, the company, keeping cozy. He thought it was the finest life a man could live, to be king of Sweden. And then, after the long winter, when the early spring came round and the days got longer and longer, right through to midsummer when the sun scarcely sets at all, the most beautiful skies, blue as a bird's egg, long, pale evenings, wonderful, wonderful times. Those days, he definitely thought that being king of Sweden was the finest life a man could possibly live. Which is why one night, I should say, he was banqueting with his nobles, his court, and it was always a fine feast. He slammed his cup down and swore an oath. Now, before I go any further, I should tell you that in those days, swearing an oath was a very serious matter. Not like nowadays. You know, nowadays when somebody says, I swear, you know they're lying, right? No, not then. Those days, if somebody swore an oath, they would die rather than live with an oath that was broken. Because it's just the way society worked. It was such a shame, such a scandal. You weren't a member of the human race if you were an oath breaker. They even believed there was a special place for the spirits of oath breakers where they would be tortured and damned. And there was Gylfi, sat with his court around, his crown gleaming on his head, his full thick beard, because he was a man of many years' strength, and his high back chair, and he slammed down ding, his cup and said, "I swear," and everyone listened. He went on, "I swear that as long as I am king of Sweden, I will not yield up so much as an inch of its soil, nor part with a pebble from its coastline." And everybody listening went, and they kind of, I know. They all urgently talked with one another, but Gylfi was fine with it. People were really worried because this was not an easy oath to keep. Because in that time, the kings of Sweden and Denmark and Norway were often at disagreement, which could easily lead to warfare, and borders changed a lot. And I mean, that was to say nothing of the fact that even the Scots would come and raid sometimes. I mean, the Vikings raided the Scots and the Picts, but it went both ways. And there'd be raiders from Finland, and then the Sami people coming from their high pastures in the north. These were difficult. These were chaotic times. But Gylfi was confident. He knew that mountains made natural borders to his lands. The sea made a natural border to his lands. And all the way around the frontiers of his land, he had his soldiers, his warriors. And he trusted them. He knew their strength. He trusted their loyalty. He paid them well and regularly. And that is key to keeping a soldier and an army behind you. I mean, that business about a pebble from the coastline, that was just getting a bit carried away because of course, well, no, Gylfi said, no, the sea takes a pebble and the next wave gives it back. We have a relationship. And Njord, who's the name of the god of the sea, Njord and I, we are on very good terms. No, every night he went to bed absolutely convinced that he could keep his oath. He would not experience the shame of a broken oath. He was confident. And then one day, the woman arrived. A woman arrived at the court of King Gylfi at his castle stronghold. And she arrived and was greeted with the hospitality extended to strangers in Scandinavia. She was offered house room, which means she would have a place to sleep and food to eat before anybody asked her any awkward questions about who she was or where she came from. But she caused a stir as soon as she came into the room, as soon as she came into the court. Oh, she was tall. She was slender and strong, as many Swedish women are. But other than that, she was different. Where Swedish women's skin is pink pale in winter and honey gold in summer, this lady's skin was of a deeper darkness, a beautiful toffee dark brown her skin was. And where Swedish women's hair is straight and glossy and almost ash white, it's so blonde. This lady's hair, and also dead straight. This lady's hair was curly and so black you could see other colors in it. It was iridescent. Her eyes were as hot as chocolate, and nobody knew what chocolate was in Sweden in those days. And everywhere she went, she took something with her. She arrived, by the way, at what was the end of a long and a hard winter. And everywhere this woman walked, she took a fragrance with her, a smell. She smelt of flowers. She smelt of fruit. She smelt, in other words, of what everybody in Sweden was longing for. She smelt of summer. Her name was Gefjon. Well, King Gylfi, looking at her, thought, Mikkelgarth. He figured she'd be from Mikkelgarth, which was the name that the Vikings, the Swedes of those days, gave to what was then one of the greatest cities in the world. We call it Istanbul in Turkey. The Vikings called it Mikkelgarth. Well, He looked at her and thought she looked like she was from Micklegarth. He'd seen traders from Micklegarth before and thought he recognized the features. And Gylfi was interested in her. She'd been in his court for a few days before he got to meet her and ask her more about herself. And she said her name was Gafion, but more than that, she didn't really offer. But she was such charming company. And the smell and her beauty. Actually, to be honest, soon all the court of King Gylfi were, hello, Your Majesty. Gossiping madly amongst themselves, because it wasn't long before, if King Gylfi was seen, it was usually shortly after Gafion, because Gafion would come into a room and Gylfi would follow and smile and sit down quite near her. And if Gafion got up and moved somewhere else, it wasn't long before Gylfi excused himself and went into the room that she'd just got. You get the point. The King of Sweden was following this stranger like a lovesick puppy. And he was seen continually in her company, talking at length and privately, and for all the courtiers were trying like mad to catch every word. They couldn't. They didn't know what they were talking about. And they tried to listen and tried to listen. But then one night, they all heard King Gylfi saying to Gafion, Gafion, you must know, I've grown so fond of your company. I wouldn't like you to leave. What can I give you to persuade you to make your stay in Sweden more what can I do to make you stay? And Gafion said, oh, Majesty, I don't need any gifts. I don't need any treasures. The courtiers, you may imagine, went, phew, but what's happening? Gylfi was, no, but Gafion, I insist. I've grown so fond of your company. I want to do everything in my power to persuade you to stay. Actually, I don't ever want to see you leave. The courtiers on. And then the bomb. They all heard King Gylfi say, in fact, whatever you want, name it, and I will give it you to persuade you to stay here with me. And Gafion said, oh, gosh. I mean, I can't think of anything. Then, said Gylfi, I will give you half of all my treasure, at which the courtiers are like, ah! And Gafion laughed and said, goodness, what would a girl do with all that treasure? And Gylfi said, then allow me to give you land. Let me give you, I offer you to make you stay a piece of land that you can have and hold and call your very own and nobody else's forever. And now the people in the court were screaming silently. Because what of King Gylfi's oath? That as long as he was king in Sweden, he would not part with a pebble from its coastline nor yield up so much as an inch of Swedish soil. And now he's giving it away to this, whoever she is. Gafion answered, oh, gosh. Then, all right, I accept a piece of land that I can have and hold and call my own for forever. Yes, I accept that, a piece of Sweden of my very own. Gylfi also remembered his oath and did a fantastic act of what in diplomatic circles is called backpedaling. Because he remembered his oath too. Lady, then, because I grant you to have and to hold as your very own as much land as you yourself can plow with no one to help you in the course of a day and a night. Well, she accepted, and Gylfi was relieved, and so were all the courtiers. Whew. Because, I mean, how much can one person plow in one day and one night? Let alone a woman, right? It takes strength and endurance to do such a difficult job. It's a man's job, right? I know this is Scandinavia, but it was a long time ago. I mean, half an acre? And that doesn't count, does it? And Geifion thanked the king and said that she would go tomorrow to get the things she needed to begin the ploughing. And Gylfi smiled. And everyone breathed a big sigh of relief. The king was not an oathbreaker. Disaster. The next day, Geifion disappeared. Gylfi looked for her everywhere. And at the end of the day, he was in the turrets of his castle looking out, asking, did anybody see which way she went? East, yeah. But no sign of her. No sign of her the next day, or the day after that, or the day after that, or the week, or the fortnight, or the month after that. And Gylfi was... Well, I thought I was very... I mean, she said... He was going over every conversation they'd had, checking, had he read it all wrong? He was really, really in low spirits. And then one day she came back. And didn't she come back? She came back driving a team of bulls. 2 bulls to do her ploughing with, right? Huge bulls. Black fur all over their immense bodies. They had shoulders like mountains. They had heads like mountains. They were colossal. They were so strong that people said to see them move was like looking at a piece of hillside move. And they lumbered forward, and you could feel the weight of their footfall. You could feel it through the floors of the castle. People were looking, boo, what's that? Boo, boo. She got closer and closer. And there she was. And then they saw her plowshare. You know what I mean by a plowshare, yeah? The curved bit of metal that cuts into the ground and turns the soil over. That's how you plow land. Well, the plowshare is a big and a heavy piece of iron. But nobody had seen a plowshare like this before. Have you ever seen pictures of the front of a Viking longship? The dragon prow that they have, and how wide it goes, and how, yeah? Now imagine a piece of iron as big as that. That's how big was the plowshare that Geifion put behind her team of bulls. And people standing on the battlements of the castle. Huh? And King Gylfi wanted to go out and talk to her, but she wasn't stopping for a chat. She got behind her team. She held onto the handles at the back of the plowshare, and she drove, she whipped and goaded her bulls, and all 3 of them began to pull and to draw, and that huge plowshare dug deep into the soil, and the whole castle was shaking. It was so strong. And they strode and strode and strode with alarming speed for such large animals pulling such a large piece of agricultural equipment. And everyone watched and watched and watched as they went in a dead, straight line away, 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 away. And then no one could see them anymore. And the sun began to set, and night did fall. And nobody had seen them. Nobody could feel that shaking anymore. Nobody could hear. But they were... Well, when you plow, you do a bit and then you come back, and do a bit and then you come back, right? That's how you plow a field. What was she doing, plowing one dead straight line? Gylfi thought, well, I imagine tomorrow I'm going to be granting her to have and hold as her very own a long, thin strip of land, like a zip. Well, I don't know what she's thinking of. I mean, she is a woman, I suppose, and women think things in ways that men don't always understand, and she's foreign as well, so perhaps it's no surprise she's behaving like, it'll be all right, and thank God she's back. At least she's back. And he went to bed that night and slept as well as he usually did. But in the morning he was woken up by an earthquake. It had to be an earthquake. He'd never been in an earthquake before, but he'd heard about them, and the earth was, well, quaking. You'd kind of recognize it, right? I've been in an earthquake once, in the 1990s, in, of all places, Manchester. Anyway, you kind of know. this earthquake, but Gylfi woke up and this whole room was shaking, the floor was shaking. The heavy oak chairs on the other side of his room were staggering across the floor like people who've had far too much to drink. And in terror, he leapt out of bed and struggled to keep his feet because the floor was moving so violently. And he tried to put his trousers on, but kept falling and stumbling, and eventually half trousered, half not. He staggered to the window, opened the shutters, and holding on as mad as he could to the stone balcony to look outside, he looked outside. The sun had just risen. It was just growing light. Okay. Everything shaking like mad, and a horrible sound in the air like rocks grinding and crashing, and then the sun setting again. Okay, no, that's wrong. This wasn't midwinter when the days are very short. This was midsummer when the days are very long. Why had the sun set again? And then in horror, he watched as the sun rose for a second time. Now, you know as well as I do, and Gylfi did too, the sun never rises twice in one day. He realized it wasn't the sun rising, setting, and rising again. He realized a whole mountain had moved in front of the sun, blocked it out, and moved on. Gylfi realized an entire chunk of his land was moving. He got dressed as quickly as he could, as best he could. He ran downstairs, got to the stables. Of course, the horses were all panicking. He grabbed a good horse and went galloping out of the castle, galloping along, galloping, following. He could see a whole mountain, a huge chunk of land was moving away. And there was a great gushing sound as water came rushing into the cracks, which were not there before. And as he galloped, he got as close as he could. And on this piece of land, he saw people waking up and trying to get about their day. He saw a lady trying to milk a cow, but the cow kept falling over and kept kicking over the bucket of milk. He saw a shepherd trying to drive a flock of sheep through a gate that kept moving and wasn't in the same place. People were trying to keep on with normal life. It's what we do. And Gylfi galloped to the farthest end. Well, now there was a cliff which hadn't been there before, and the sea had come rushing in, and he could see a whole chunk of his land moving out to sea. And at the far end of that, well, new island, he could just see 3 black bulls. And though he couldn't see, he could easily imagine behind them that woman with the beautiful black hair and the toffee brown skin, goading them on, driving them on. She'd cut in a dead straight line, like carving a piece of meat. She'd cut off a whole chunk of Sweden. And Gylfi watched in horror. His oath was broken. And he watched in horror as that whole chunk of Sweden went off into the sea and stopped miles away in the sea between Sweden and Denmark. And there it seemed to stop and to settle. Gylfi galloped back to the palace. He ordered messengers and told messengers to go to that island to find Gefjon and find what kind of an explanation she could offer for what she'd done. They went. They found people getting on with life as best they could, well, just as normal. Except there was no sign of Gefjon. She'd disappeared as suddenly and mysteriously as she'd arrived. Gylfi was heartbroken, genuinely heartbroken. Well, I'll tell you for nothing, if Gylfi's not in Valhalla, you'll hear more about Valhalla later. He'll be spinning in his grave now because that piece of land still exists. You can find it on a map. It's called Zealand, as in New Zealand, but this was the old one, Zealand. It means sea land. It's on the map between Sweden and Norway in the Baltic Sea, and it belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark now. King Gylfi's broken oath is still broken forever. Well, so he was a man in disgrace, a man in shame. But I don't want you to think he was a fool. He wasn't. He decided he had to do something about it, but also about her. And so weeks after this catastrophe, this disaster, he'd made a plan. He took off his crown. He took off his furs. He put on the warm but simple clothes of a tramp. He used magic to change his appearance. Oh no, he was he was a well-educated man. He changed his name from Gylfi to Gangleri, which in Old Norse means way weary. It means road tired, somebody who's tired of walking, if you like. And telling everybody he was Gangleri, just a way weary, just a tired man of the road, he left his palace, he left all its comforts, and just began traveling, walking. And he walked through Sweden, he walked through Denmark, he walked through Finland, he walked through Russia, where there were some Swedish people settled, by the way. That's another story. He traveled far and wide, trying to find out more about Gefjon, where she came from, where she'd gone to. And as he traveled, he learned a lot. He learned that we lived in a world called Midgard. This is where human beings lived. Somewhere across a huge ocean, there was another land which people spoke of fearfully, called Jotunheimen, which means the world of the giants. Gylfi picked up information on his travels. He learned that Gefjon was a relative of the Aesir, and that the Aesir were the gods. And he knew the gods. He knew All-Father Odin. He knew Thor, the thunder god, friend to mankind. You know Thor, right, with the hammer. Not this week, but in weeks to come, I'll tell you about that hammer and where he got it from, how he got it. It's a wonderful story. So Gylfi learned that Gefjon was related to the gods. So maybe she was with the gods. Where was that? He learned that the gods lived in a world above our world, a stronghold they called Asgard. And there was a way that you could reach Asgard by means of a bridge. Now, if you've seen the American movies with Chris Hemsworth and, forgotten his name, the English guy, and Anthony Hopkins, they talk about the Bifrost. I think they call it the Bifrost. Why wouldn't they? It's their accent. But in the American films, the Bifrost is kind of like a machine. The Bifrost is broken. Quick, open the Bifrost. It works. It's another way of telling the story. But as I understand it, Bifrost. Bifrost is a bridge from Earth to the skies. It's a bridge made of light. 7 bands of light, 7 different colors, red and yellow and orange and purple and blue, and I can't remember them, and I can't remember the words of that song. Perhaps if you're younger than me, perhaps you can. But you know what that bridge is, right? Yeah. Bifrost is the rainbow. So King Gylfi went looking for the beginning of that bridge. Have any of you ever tried to find the beginning of a rainbow? Might have had luck with it in London this afternoon, where I'm talking to you from, because there was a lot of sunshine suddenly broken by, of all things, a hailstorm. There would have been a rainbow somewhere. I didn't see it. And I've tried many times to find the beginning of a rainbow. Never succeeded. But Gylfi tried and tried and tried and traveled and traveled and traveled until eventually he found the beginning of that rainbow, stepped onto it, and began to walk away from the world, the only world he knew, stepping onto that bridge of shivering light. And it was so beautiful. And it had a sound to it which was almost like a musical chord. And he walked, stepping and stepping onto light itself, rising above the world. Well, if you've ever been in an aeroplane, you know what that looks like. He'd never done anything of the sort. And so he walked and walked and walked until the bridge began to dip down on the other side, and he arrived in the most beautiful land he had ever seen in his life. The luscious meadows. The grass was so thick it looked like green velvet. And he could see a huge wall, a great strong stronghold. There's a tautology for you. Sorry about that. And as he walked towards this stronghold, as he came to the other side of Bifrost, that bridge, he saw an enormous man. He's this kind of guessed this probably wasn't a man, but most likely a god, one of the Aesir, the tribe of gods. This man had by his side a horn, not for drinking, but for blowing, like a big trumpet, you know, that kind of horn. only it was made of gold. And this man, when he saw Gylfi, greeted him and smiled. And the flash of his smile was amazing because his teeth were all gold. Gylfi didn't know that, but this is Heimdall, the sentry of the gods, who spends all day, all night, every night, sitting, looking over that bridge, watching for what he knows is one day coming. The giants. Gylfi greeted Heimdall, said he was a traveler, his name was Wayweary, but he had looking for answers to lots of questions. And Heimdall said, go to Valhalla, and indicated a feasting hall, a fine-looking feasting hall, which gleamed in the sun as much as Heimdall's teeth, because the roof was made of war shields put together, but the war shields were made of gold. And on the top of that roof, there was a golden cockerel, like a weathercock, but made of solid gold. I know that cockerel, his name is Gullin Kraki. He will crow once. Same time that Heimdall sees the giants coming up that rainbow bridge to attack. Not yet. Not yet. Gylfi walked towards that hall, and as he came towards it, there was a little gate, and there was a man standing in the gate juggling. You've seen people juggling, right? Yeah, but you've never seen anyone juggling with 3 swords, have you? And Gylfi was amazed, and his man, who are you? What do you want? And Gylfi coughed apologetically, explained his name was Gangleri, Wayweary, and that he'd been traveling a long way with, started with 1 question, but now he had 1,000, and could he possibly have lodging? Go in there, ask the Lord you find there. And Gylfi walked towards a large hall. It was open. He walked inside and immediately stopped, because there he saw 3 huge men sat side by side on strong chairs. Well, Gylfi just took off his hat and looked at the floor. He could feel the power pulsing from these men. And they asked him, who are you? What do you want? So, saving your lordship's pardon, my name is Gangleri, and I'm just a poor traveler, but I've been traveling and studying and asking questions. I started with only a few questions, but questions make more questions, and now my head is bursting with questions, and I wonder, could I stay the night? And if there's somebody I could ask my questions to, I'd be so grateful, please. What do you want to know? And Gylfi said, well, to start with, who are you? High, said the one in the middle. Just as high, said the one to the side. The third, answered the third. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be in your presence. Yes, they all said. You are. Well, that was to the point, wasn't it? Now tell us what your questions are. What do you want to know? Oh, well, everything really. I started with a little thing, but it built and built. And on my travels, I've learned about the gods, the Aesir, but it just makes more questions. Because people always shrug and say they don't know. But okay, I know there's the gods, and the gods made the world. But I want to know, did anybody make the gods? What was here at the beginning? And if so, do the gods worship other gods that we don't know about? And of the gods, who's the strongest, and who's the bravest, and who's the cleverest, and who's the wickedest? It seems, said High, you wish to know the ins and outs of a dragon's mouth. In fact, said Just as High, there better be more to you than meets the eye, because you are asking for real knowledge. And, said the third, there better be more to you than meets the eye, Wayweary, because real knowledge can burn like a dragon's breath. Now, Gylfi admitted that he was scared, but that he was desperate to know. And so High, Just as High, and the third began to unfold the mysteries of creation. They said it started with nothing, an immense emptiness, a yawning void called Ginun Gagap. Except, though they said it was empty, they also said it was full, because it contained not only everything that is now, but also everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. They explained to Gylfi, whose head was already spinning, that even though there was no light in Ginun Gagap, it wasn't dark. And though there was no noise, yet it wasn't silent. And though it was empty, it was also full, and Gylfi was, luckily, they just kind of pushed on. They described how after an uncountable period of time, because time at that time was not time and did not exist, in that emptiness, two very different regions, areas began to appear. One was a world of ice and poisonous water. And on the opposite side, if such a place can be said to have sides, but far away from the ice, there began to arise a world of flame and fire and rock so hot it had turned to liquid. And that as these two regions grew, the one of fire and ice is called Niflheim. And the one, Niflheim means dark world. And the world of fire and molten rock is called Muspelheim, which means, not very promisingly, means home of the destroyers of the worlds, but we'll come to that, not this week. Well, they described how these worlds grew and grew and grew and grew until fire met ice in the middle of the void, and that reaction did something extraordinary. Creation began, matter. Now, ancient Scandinavians will have understood this very easily because they knew Iceland. Iceland was colonized by settlers from Norway. And in Iceland, to this very day, you get lava from volcanoes bursting out of the soil, bursting out of the ground, into the waters of the frozen Arctic Ocean. And so that liquid rock immediately freezes and becomes new land. So Vikings understood this. You get the rock, the hot rock, you get the lava, you get the cold, you get a new thing. In Ginun Gagap, this new thing was an immense giant called Hymir. Hymir floated in the space between the world of ice and the world of fire. Hymir was asleep. Hymir did nothing except sleep and sweat and shiver and snore and groan and spit and dribble. And his eyes never opened. He had no mind, he had no thought. He was just huge. High, just as high, and the third told Gylfi that Hymir was stretched out in such a way that his feet were close to the world of ice and snow and darkness. And so his feet got cold. What do you do when your feet are cold? If your feet are cold in bed and you can't get a hot water bottle, do you ever rub them together? In his sleep, Hymir rubbed his feet together, and from that rubbing, a new creation started. From the rubbing together of his feet, a new race was created, the race of frost giants. And they left his feet and went off to live in Niflheim and make their homes around Niflheim and in the cold mountains and glaciers of Niflheim and that world of poison and cold and endless night. Hymir's head and upper body were near Muspelheim and the world of heat and rock and lava and fire. And so he sweated. And from the sweat of his armpits came fire giants. And fire giants pushed their way out from underneath his armpits and away from his body, and they went off and made their world in Muspelheim, where they were led by a giant king called Surt, who has a sword made of flame. But still Hymir, eyes closed, lay there. Many things happened. A cosmic cow called Alfumla for centuries was licking at a block of ice at a corner of Niflheim, and it was salty. And she licked and she licked and she licked until her soft and tender tongue began to give that block of ice shape. And she shaped that ice into a being known as Buri, whom High, Justice High and the Third explained to Gylfi was an ancestor of the gods. They described how Buri married a giantess called Bethsla, daughter of the giant, oh, what was his name? Ringtorn? Gortorn? It'll come to me, doesn't matter. They married, and they had a son called Bor, and Bor married another giantess, and they had sons. High Justice High and the Third said, that couple had triplets, 3 sons, so beautiful, so radiant, so shining, that it was obvious a new thing had come into the world. Their names, said High Justice High and the Third, were Odin, Vili, Ve. Gylfi gasped. He knew Odin. Odin was the Allfather. Odin was, he understood that name. But what happened, said Gylfi. And High Justice High and the Third explained how Odin, Vili, and Ve looked at this great giant, Hymir, lying there, sweating, snoring, dribbling, and his drool was venomous, and his sweat was poisonous, and I'm sorry, but there were other and nastier liquids that leaked from this huge giant. Odin, Vili, and Ve looked upon creation and saw that it was not good. And so they attacked Hymir. They overcame Hymir, just 3 of them, and he woke and fought back, but they slew him, they killed him, they crushed him, they pulled him limb from limb, and from his flesh they made the earth. From his blood they made the seas, oceans, rivers, lakes, streams. They made all the water that we know. From his bones they made the mountain ranges. And from his knuckles and fingers and from his teeth they made rocks and boulders. They fashioned and began to fashion the world. There was a huge ash tree, Yggdrasil, that rose all the way through the universe. High Justice High and the Third explained, you can't see Yggdrasil, you can't touch it, but it's there. I mean, can you see gravity? No, but you can feel it. And High Justice High and the Third described how Odin, Vili, and Ve made 9 worlds, or at least they shaped many of the worlds, hanging from the branches of this tree. And so they worked, creating everything. And Gylfi was amazed at what they'd done. And then they made for themselves a home called Asgard. And they took the brow. Oh, I forgot, sorry. They took Hymir's skull, and they took his skull, empty now, and they used the dome of his skull to make the dome that we call the sky. And they took his brain, and I'm afraid they just threw bits of it around like tearing brioche, and made the clouds. Well, said High, Justice High, and the Third, you could say Odin, Vili, and Ve killed Hymir, but doesn't the earth live? Doesn't the sea sigh like a living thing? Don't clouds bring life in the form of rain? Isn't the blood of Hymir that water which gives life to fish, to humans, to everything, and without it nothing grows? Isn't, in fact, Hymir is not dead at all. Odin, Vili, and Ve didn't kill him. They simply changed him. That, said High Justice High and the Third, is the way that Odin, Vili, and Ve saw it. But the giants didn't. The giants in the world of ice and the world of fire saw what had happened to their ancestor and swore revenge on the gods. But the gods, knowing the giants one day would attack, took the ridges of Hymmir's brow, the bone underneath your eyebrows. Feel your own. Do you feel how strong that is? They took that and made that into a great circular wall. Gylfi spun around and he could just see through the gates of the hall. He could see the great wall, but it didn't look quite like that. But Gylfi turned back and said, well, thank the gods in their wisdom for doing that, because with such a wall, they must know that they are safe in Asgard. Asgard is a place where no giant can ever enter. And these are walls which will never be destroyed, at which I have to tell you, Justice High and the Third looked a bit sheepish, looked a bit kind of, bit embarrassed. They muttered amongst themselves for a moment, and then they said to Gylfi, yes, as a matter of fact, there was a time when a giant came within these walls, a giant called Hrungnir, and that he got very drunk and disgraced himself and embarrassed the gods, and it was the gods' fault. We don't like to bring it up. And there was also a time, a worse time, when there was war between the gods. And those great walls were destroyed, and the gods had to build entirely new walls. But, said Justice High and the Third, way weary, you are tired from the road. You have only a human brain. We could go on for much longer, but you look tired. So, we suggest you stay the night in Valhalla, feast with the heroes, sleep, stay for a week. Explore Asgard. There's much to amuse and delight. Be our guest. And we'll meet you here again, 6 o'clock on Saturday. And we'll tell you the story of the giant Hrungnir, how he got drunk and how he had a fight with Thor. And they will tell Gylfi about how the walls were destroyed and made again. And if you come back next Saturday at 6 o'clock, I will tell you those stories. They are glorious and fun. Not quite so cosmic as what we had today, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Hooray.
No idea what the time was. What time? How long did we go for?
Last one.
That's cool. Hey, everyone happy?
Yes.
Yes.
Well done, James.
Thank you.
Hello. Now, you know, everybody who's new here, see you next time. If you've been here before, you know that there is a hat underneath the screen. And if you wish to put a contribution in for myself and for James, please do. It's pay what you want, if you want. But of course, it makes a big difference to us at this time and any time. And by doing so, you're supporting storytelling itself, actually. But it's entirely up to you. And come along next week and bring some friends. And we really hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to be around for a moment if you want to chat. And I want to get to look at James's pictures now. They look beautiful. This is going to be available online after the event. So anybody you know who might like it, they're welcome. And that's it. I might even shut up now.
Come and say goodbye. Come and say goodbye.
Bye.
Who's that? Bye-bye.
Yes. Thank you, Giles.
Yeah, thank
Super,
you.
Mark.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Did you enjoy it?
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you. We're trying to find a hat. We can't see a hat. Do we have to change the screen size or something to see the hat?
Maybe.
I
It's,
think you have to come out of the meeting in
Oh,
order to see the hat. I think the hat is on the outside page.
On the web page itself, because we're in Zoom.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a link to where you can find the hat in the chat of this group, so you'll all be able to find it.
We definitely want the hats.
we're
Definitely.
listening to Sarah now, who's one of the brilliant organisers of World Storytelling Cafe, which is an initiative set up by Mike.
Cat in the Hat.
The Cat in the Hat. It's a wonderful thing, the World Storytelling Cafe, and it's growing and growing. There's going to be more and more. Mark, it's lovely to see you.
Oh, you too, sir. You're sounding great and looking great. I know everyone's saying this now, but you do. You haven't aged a day.
Guys who don't know, but Mark and I were at school together. Mark left the school we were at together when Mark was 16. And then some years ago, there was a school reunion, which we both turned up for. And my wife was there. My wife did not go to my school, but I'm mostly blind now. And of course, Mark didn't know that. And at some point, my wife said to me, Giles, there's a man over there who keeps looking at you and keeps looking really upset because you're not saying hello to him. And I found I was like, Mark! It was wonderful to see.
I was stood on the wrong side, whatever that was at the time. I kept waving. I thought, what am I? I must have upset this guy 20 years before, and you know.
That's in the hat.
Exactly, you found the hat. Mark, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to tell you, Mark was so good at doing impersonations of teachers' voices that he once did an impression of a man who was from Lancashire.
Yes.
And Mark, looking out the window of our classroom on the lunch break, saw a kid breaking school rules, going over the street when he wasn't allowed to, buying some sweets from the shop over the road, and going back. And Mark called out to him in Mr. Hurst's voice, going, "Yo," whatever his name was, "Taylor, get into my room. I need a word with you. I saw you." And this bloke went into Mr. Hurst's office and confessed to everything. Mr. Hurst had no idea that he'd done it.
Giles.
Hello.
Hi, this is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
I have to leave because I have another event in 5 minutes.
I know you do. Good
I
luck.
wondered if you'd like to tell everybody about our exciting plans for next week.
I'd love to. Next week, because James is making these beautiful drawings, Mike and Sarah came up with this idea.
James, looking well, mate.
Great to see you, Mark.
Yes.
Cheers, Mark.
More recently, it's been about a year and a half ago. So,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's just every year ago. Great to see you.
Hang on, I've lost. Mark, can you just let me listen for a second? I don't know if Arthur would be interested in this, but from next week, if you want, bring a pen, bring paper, bring a brush, whatever. And when the stories are finished, or during, if you think you can listen and do it at the same time, if children want to do drawings inspired by the stories, they can then post those to a link which will be available next week, and they'll be put on in a gallery on the World Storytelling Cafe. So that way, you know, this is story drawing, and if children want to join in and make their own pictures, we'd love to see what they've done. And if they get selected, they get in the gallery, and it'll be there. So that sounds cool?
We'll also feature some of them on our Instagram pages, so you could get famous for your amazing art.
And just be part of the World Storytelling Cafe.
Absolutely. Bye.
That's such a lovely idea.
And you
Arthur
had a quick question. James, what illustration package is that? Is that
that's Sketches? Sketches is free. It's a really easy one to use. I've got a computer pen, but what you can do is you draw a shape and then it colors it in. So it halves the, you know, it cuts the amount of time it takes to color stuff in by a massive amount. Because we talked about, you know, maybe using a brush and then having a camera looking at you. Yeah, Sketches.
Cool. All right. Good stuff. Thanks, lads. Really good effort. Really enjoyed it. Good to see you again, guys.
Yeah.
Great seeing you, man.
You too. Lovely to meet you, Arthur.
Yeah, hopefully it's in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe next week.
Yeah, we'll see some of Arthur's work on Sketches. Huh?
That'd be good. Then we do that.
Yeah.
I've been practicing all day.
And you there.
You should have seen the early stuff.
Yeah. I quite like the it was well synchronized, lads. It was you know, I think the sketches were relating to the
in the cafe.
Live drawing makes it really exciting because mostly
you got to be on it.
You're kind of wondering what's that? what colours their hair?
You haven't launched into the wrong story yet, or done last week's or something like that, you know.
Well, what we had was the feet pointing at the ice, and I had one of them in the fire, so I had to take the foot out. put it.
Yes, I saw that.
Put it.
Very good.
I think it makes it more exciting.
Well, that's what the app does, because you can undo stuff. Whereas if I'd drawn it in a pen, that would have been it. So no, it's really lovely being involved, and the stories are so great.
Yeah,
that's the
it was really good. And who knew that pictures could have comedy timing as well? It made me giggle.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
I love the old Vikings, and of course, my older son may have actually been interested in that because he is an obsessive follower of a band called Amon Amarth, who are a Viking. Sing about all this kind of Viking mythology. So
Wow.
Absolutely.
Super heavy.
Is that the bunch who won Eurovision?
Similar? No, it's, yeah,
You read the
yeah, similar style. Format.
and you read the cafe.
Yes.
I see there's somebody with
Well,
a
bring some sketches along.
Yeah.
Thanks, lads.
All right.
Right,
Take
we'll go
care.
and find this hat. Thanks, lads. Good effort.
Thank you.
It's in the hat.
Fun weekend.
Have a good weekend, everybody. I'm going to jump off and I'm going to head off, I think.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Giles.
Giles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, I think. Is that Mike's voice?
Thank you
Giles,
so much.
Giles,
Yes.
one thing. Finland was never trying to invade Sweden.
I beg your pardon?
Finland was never invading or trying to invade Norwegian countries.
I don't think I said so, did I? Oh, yes, I said they maybe had disagreements.
Because we were just a bunch of people living in the forests. We need to invade anyone.
Yeah, perhaps the Swedes would have attacked if they knew you were there.
Hello, George.
Swedes were attacking us.
Well, one of my favorite ones is because the Norwegian raiders went west to Scotland and to America and to everywhere else in Ireland. The first language spoken in Dublin was not Irish, but Norse. The Swedish Vikings went east and they founded a kingdom which became very wealthy because they controlled all the trade coming from China into Europe. And there's an Arab writer, traveler called Ibn who says he meets them at a trading place and he calls them the Rus. That's where the word Russia comes from. And he describes them as having red hair. They must have been amazingly handsome, don't you think?
Yeah. So Finland was a trading post. So when Vikings wanted to go east, they crossed the sea, they came to Finland, and they bought here furs and food.
The Finnish language is
iron.
The Finnish language is Finno-Ugric, isn't it? It's related to Hungarian and to Magyar and to.
So it's not the Scandinavian language.
Not at all.
We are not Scandinavians.
Well, I knew a Bulgarian man who used to be the bar manager in a place where I used to tell stories every month, and he said that the vocabulary is entirely different, but if you speak Magyar, and therefore I assume Finnish, you have the grammatical structure in place already to learn Japanese and Korean. Isn't that interesting?
Yes. Both, all these languages, they sound like you are shooting with the machine gun.
But I mean, doesn't the ancestry of the Finns and the Huns start from Central Asia? I mean, wherever.
Nobody actually know where Finns came from. Probably we were just lonely hunters who came a little bit from here and there and just came after the moose into Finland. So it's not like we are not like a tribe.
No, well, I've not. Okay, I suppose so. Yeah, that makes sense. I've never been to Finland. I've been to Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, but never Finland. I'd love to one day.
Well, you are welcome. I have a big house.
Well, thank you.
It's very beautiful. I went swimming in the pool in the harbour. There's like an ice. There was a swimming pool with ice in it, and I was swimming it. What was it? February 2 years ago. Really beautiful.
Huh.
In Helsinki.
I was told an anecdote about two Finnish men, which I was told was illustrative. And there's a Finnish man in the sauna, and another man comes and gets into the sauna, and there's a lot of there's the coals and there's the steam, and then one of them says, turns to the other and says, "It's hot." And then an hour later, the other man says, "Oh, it's hot." To which the other man says, "Listen, did we come here to sweat or did we come here to chat?" And somebody told me that was. I don't know. I've never been. Right, I'm going to go. I think because I'm exhausted. But that was really lovely. Thank you all for coming, and do come again. Do find that hat if you want to, and not if you don't. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Giles. Good night.
Thank you, Giles.
Bye bye.
Good night. Goodbye. Aita. Thank you. Tak.
Tak.
That was great. I really enjoyed it again. Such a good format. Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that's Sarah.
Thank
It
you.
is Sarah. I was meant to go, but I just couldn't tear myself away.
Oh, goodness. Goodness.
So I'm doing a jewellery sale at the same time.
Ah,
See you soon. Take
see you
care.
soon. Good luck.